Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2. I will get smoother and much better at this as I get along, I'm sure, but I'm still learning, but it's getting better. I have made some changes as well, as you can probably see. I've made my camera a little bit bigger on this view, give it a handy Drew Cam name there, and I modified my stream chat as well. The idea being that it's a little bit more readable. So we'll see if the changes definitely help. So anyway, we'll be getting back to this. But I've been playing around. Guess what I can do here? Look at that. You can even see me in glorious HD. So one of the comments the other week was that quite a lot of the time I'm just talking to the camera, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if I'm doing that, it's rather not wasted screen space. So I've got a different view here. Where there's just literally stream chat on the right hand side and me talking to the camera, which we can use for most of the time. So if I have got something to show up to the camera, then you'll actually be able to see it, which was a slightly sarky comment I was given, but totally and utterly deserved. Anyway, because you might as well use the camera if you've got one. And this is not like I said, this isn't a gaming stream, so I'm not going to be showing games on the screen all that often, though we may do a bit of that, but there we go. So, welcome to everybody on the chat. I can see a couple of names already, so welcome Suriel08. Thank you, good to see you again, sir. And of course, my partner in crime, Daddy Hoggy, good evening to you as well. And we'll welcome others along as we go. So, just starting off on the stream this week, today's topic is going to be common mistakes, which is actually quite good fun, particularly Oh, I've got a few more people turning up. Hang on, let me. I must admit, I've got the problem now that my screen resolution is too low. I'm going to have to squint. So here we got. Hang on. Magnificent Mako. Hello there, sir. And Raz Zenith and Steve Shaw. Hello, sir. Good to have you guys along. I really appreciate you coming along. So hopefully we'll find this interesting. So common mistakes. That is going to be all the sort of things that writers do. At least, well, certainly the ones I do, that can actually kind of trip your manuscript up. So there's various bits and pieces that you go through in terms of actually getting a novel together, and that's drafting and redrafting and so on and so forth. And in between those steps, hopefully the quality improves. And I'm going to go through a few of the technicalities of that as we go through this evening. And hello, Chris. Good to see you, sir. Fantastic for having you along as well. Now, I was really pleased actually from my last stream that I had some volunteers for bits of manuscript that we can critique. So, big shout out to, who have I got here? Matt Aitkinson. I don't know if Matt's actually on this evening because I can't always tell from from the usernames and the real names. If you're about Matt, then do make yourself known, or not, of course, because you might want to retain anonymous internet and everything. My best buddy Dave Hughes, Sezlin. It's Selazan. Is that right, Daddy Hoggy? Selazan? That's right, I think. Anyway, how he pronounces funky, cool kind of elite commander. So he's volunteered some stuff, and Stephen Shaw has also volunteered. So, and Stephen's on the stream tonight. So thank you very much for that. We will get to those in a future episode. I thought it was only fair that we kind of shoot one of my stories to bits. In this first episode, looking at kind of common mistakes. So, question for you all: who's done the homework? Put a yes or something like that in the chat to say you've done your homework, or you can kind of hang there in shame as the headmaster waggles his finger at you. Selizen. There we go. So, who's done the homework? Let's have a quick show of hands in the chat. No. What was the homework? Oh, well, there we go. The homework was to read the story I dropped in the link last week. Oh, you missed the first episode. Oh, you didn't. You were on the chat. It doesn't really matter, let's be honest, because and you've got no excuse for missing the first episode because it was on YouTube, so that's not going to wash for me. But never mind. So anyway, the reason being was I had the short story that I kind of put up there for you guys to kind of go through and see what you thought, really. So I was going to... Nobody's done that. No, you're useless. Nobody's done their work. And Daddy Hoggy remembers it from a long, long time ago. So never mind. We can go through it anyway. So I was just more interested to see how any of your thoughts actually on what sort of level of quality you thought the story was at before I went diving into my own critique of it. So actually, since Daddy Hoggy's read it, maybe I can document my homework. Oh dear. One of these days I'll have to ask the question about how many O levels and everything, GCSEs and everything have we actually got between us? Because I think that might be quite fun. All the excuses are coming out now. So you're going to have to try harder than this, guys. Don't remember last episode I was talking about what it takes to be a writer. You see, dedication, commitment, and getting the job done. Anyway, so that's quite funny. Daddy Hockey, if you want to dump anything in the chat, just about general impressions of the story. You can be brutal. Don't worry about it. I'll keep waffling on while you have a think about what you want to say. And if you don't want to say anything, that's fine as well. Because we can get to it anyway. So while we're just giving that some thought. So what have I been doing this week? Very quick update. Just more writing. I'm still working on Shadewood 3. I think I've got to 48,000 words. I'm having actually some problems with this story at the moment because it is. I'm writing it in bits. I don't normally end up like this. I usually write chronologically, so I'm actually stringing some bits and pieces of scenes together. So I've got a few challenges on my own writing at the moment as well. So we'll see how we go. But it's moving on. It's moving on. Mr. Mr. McAfee says you're a bad person. You should feel bad. Dear. Well, yeah, if you're going to read something. Yeah, as long as you're reading, that's okay. I'll let you off. That's all. So, but anyway, so going back to the topic of this evening, common mistakes. So I'm not talking about not having the right pen or mislaying your laptop or things like that. But there are some actually technical errors people make, and one of those, the biggest one actually, is not backing stuff up. So a big plea, and I'm sure most of you are fairly computer literate on this sort of thing. Make sure you back things up. Have a backup of the backup, and if you can, put a backup somewhere else where you're not normally working. All of those sort of things I'm kind of going to give, expect as a given. We're actually talking about the writing. Anyway, Gary Holger has given me a bit of feedback. He said it was a good sci-fi story. You're very character-driven, which is very true, yes. So while it was shoehorned into the Elite universe, that shoehorning actually detracted from the purity of the sci-fi. So there we go. And Chris Viking has lost 2 started short stories that way. No backups. Backups. You must religiously back up and have at least 2 backups of the original in case you lose something. Don't trust USB sticks. They're the spawn of the devil. They bust just when you need them. Cloud backup nowadays is pretty good, so get yourself something like that and sync it off and copy, or email it to yourself, or email it to your Gmail, or anything like that. Make sure you have got a backup. Don't get me started on backups as a network manager. Well, so you can support me on this one. Backups are incredibly important. The other thing, actually, still, obviously, if you're working in a word processor or something, do save it quite often, but careful when you save, because you've also got the undo, redo options. Be careful when you close and open the file, because if you close and open it, you can lose the undos that sometimes you need to go back and do. I do quite often keep many different versions of the file that I'm working on. Or sometimes write in a separate file if I'm not convinced I'm writing something that I actually want to put in the story. So, but yeah, backup. Do all that kind of good stuff. Your choice of word processor and all that kind of good stuff, I'm going to kind of leave up to you. I'm not really all that religious on word processors. I use Word because I'm simply familiar with it. That makes a lot of sense, but definitely backup. So, without further ado, let us go back over to the document. And I hope for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, and hope for those watching on Twitch as well, that my modifications to the stream in terms of visual kind of usefulness hopefully are kind of working for you, which is good. We'll see if we get what feedback we get on that. That'd be really good. So let's go over to my story, shall we? So it's over here. So Ascension. So this is a 9-page short story. I don't know how many words actually it is. Let me 4,463, and that includes all the copyright gubbins. So what I've done is I've gone through and kind of color-coded the document, so hopefully on screen it will be a little bit easier for us to kind of dissect. Now, I'm just going to zap them. Oh, and I've got a follower there, Max Sam6. Hello, Max Sam6. Good to have you aboard. Right, so let's just zoom this up, make the best use of the screen estate, because aware that afterwards on YouTube and Twitch and so on and so forth, you may not have the best screen monitor. So here we go. And apologies if I'm looking left again, because the monitor that you're looking at now is over here for me. So I will try and look back at the stream chat every so often as well. So anyway, get past all this sort of stuff. So Ascension, written by Drew Wagar, nothing wrong with that. That's all very sensible stuff. Here's a little aside, actually. If you are putting any of your stuff on the web, even if you have no intention of selling it, so yes, okay, we're going to lose the chat stream each time we flip focus. I will bear that in mind, yes. I don't know if there's a way to preserve that. Perhaps some Twitch expert can tell me about that. Just notice my mic is in totally the wrong place as well. So going back to the screen here, licensing. Now, you automatically own the copyright to anything you write. But if you don't state that, it's very easy for someone to purloin your stuff. And you don't really want that, because you've spent a lot of time working on it. So the easiest way to just assert your copyright is to license your work. Now that doesn't need to be really a very, very big deal, but and it doesn't cost you anything to do this. Fortunately, because there is this thing called a Creative Commons license. Now, there are various different versions of this. Is actually now quite an old one, version 2. I think it's 3 or possibly even 4 now. But you can put a license in that's kind of been properly checked and asserted by an independent organisation, which prevents people doing stuff to your work that you're not happy with, at least illegally doing things with work that you're not happy with. Obviously, people will pinch stuff anyway. Version 4, Daddy Hoggy says, so I knew they'd be moving up. So that's obviously 8 years of progress. But what you can do here is you can set conditions on the way your work can be used. So you may not want to completely restrict people, say, no, you're not allowed to do anything at all. You can give certain capability. Now, this was a free short story. It had some kind of elite references, so I wasn't comfortable allowing anybody to make any commercial use over it. And I was quite happy that people could do stuff with it after it, if they so desire. So this is a particular type of the license called attribution, non-commercial, share alike. So it basically means if you want to use this, you can, but you have to attribute to me, the original author, to say I'm using Drew Wagar's work, and here's the license that he originally used. Non-commercial, you can do anything you like with this, but you mustn't make any money out of it. And share alike, if you do use this for anything, you can only distribute your piece of work under the same conditions that this one was created. So those are the you can build in some conditions for the sensible usage of. And to be honest, it is far better for you to put a license of some type on your work than to just leave it blank. Because if you leave it blank, either people will just pinch it, and then you won't be able to defend it very easily if it suddenly becomes a useful thing. And secondly, it may discourage people from using it at all, if that was your intention for them to use it, because it's unlicensed. It's in a kind of weird space on the internet where nobody's sure whether they can use it or not. And to be honest, as a writer, you're probably interested in potentially promoting yourself. So it's a good way to point people back to you as an individual if you want to get visibility on the sort of work that you do. And you may write a short story of this kind of type that comes around and gives you some credit in the future. So do license your work. Go and have a look at the Creative Commons website. I think it's probably just creativecommons.org, but a quick Google will find it. Choose a license that's appropriate for what you're trying to do, and make sure you do put a license on it. Even if it's, you think, well, I'm just sticking it on the internet. You don't know whether it's going to be useful, successful, or where it might be in 8 or 9 years' time. Who knows? So do license your work. I've put a bit of thanks into. I've actually done some plagiarism. This story, I did pinch a phrase from the Bible, actually, from the prophet Ezekiel. So actually, the book of Ezekiel, which presumably was written by Ezekiel. Now he's been dead for maybe, I don't know, 3,000 years or something. So he probably doesn't mind. And I used it with a bit of plagiarism, to kind of reinforce the story. And I've left a little author's note. I've updated this, as you possibly saw. So I wrote this back in 2010. It's another one of my stories where I am trying to put religion and science together. Some of them are characters from my Shadewood books were first, came around in this story. And it was the inspiration for Shadewood in many ways. I've deliberately not edited it because... it's an example of what was state of the art for me in 2010. And so now, 8 years on, I can see quite a lot of things that need to be fixed. And what is also fair to say is I did edit it at the time. This also went through proofreading on, I think, the OLEAT forum. So it would have been subject to a little bit of external oversight as well, not just me doing the editing. And then the actual story, we can kind of talk about it, but don't worry. So if you haven't read it, doesn't matter, but let's go into it. So, title, Okay, so I've color-coded this sort of stuff. Now, the first problem I've got here is one that I was guilty of for a really, really, really long time, and it's actually a really hard one to overcome. almost every writer who starts off falls into this particular trap, and the trap is viewpoint, or point of view. So you can see in the first paragraph here, Kiri smiled at clumsy attempts to control his herg. So she's looking, we're in Kiri's viewpoint. Kiri is the character we've started off. She's a young girl. Miru is the young lad who's with her. They're obviously both on some kind of creature, a bit like a horse, but I've called it a herg because, science fiction. And we start off, and Kiri's looking across, watching Miru trying to control his herg. With a little bit of explanation as to why. So it's a new beast. Nothing wrong with that at all. Kiri's watching, amused here. The beast circles on its hind leg, bucking and rearing as Miru coaxed it into reaching the crest of the hill. So we've set a little bit of context. This is all right. So, we've kind of begun to introduce the two characters. And, we've got some stuff in there as well. And yes, the almost. Where's the almost? I probably haven't got all the errors in this either, so do point out them as well. You don't need almost almost all the time. So the reason I've flipped it here is that Kiri's watching. We've been in Kiri's kind of viewpoint for this scene so far, and we're still here in Kiri's viewpoint as well. So Kiri watches the herd caught sight at the end of the ocean. I've done a little bit about the fact that it's got two eyelids. That just gives you a feeling about the kind of beast that it is. And then the beast snorts and fidgets, and then Miru almost slipped off. Suddenly, you've confused the reader, Drew, because we were from Kiri's perspective, and now we're in Miru's. So he's grabbing things, and we've shifted. We've lost. Okay, hang on. Kind of subtly in this sense, and some readers will skip over this. Some readers will go, "What happened here?" Because we're supposed to be looking at Miru. So what I should have said here, the edit here is, Kiri watched as, or Kiri looked across when, because we should still be looking through Kiri's perspective. We shouldn't switch in a scene unless we really, really signpost it clearly to the reader. What a lot of writers will do is they'll flip around all over the shop when they're writing a scene, and you can't do that. What you've got to do is you've got to pick a perspective and stick with it for the scene. And it's quite important to figure that out at the start, because depending on the action you're wanting to describe, you need to choose the character who you want to describe that action through. So if there's going to be an explosion, you don't want the character who's in the next room. Or you don't want the character who's looking in the wrong direction. Or you don't want the character, da-da-da-da-da. You've got to get the right character. And you must be very, very careful to only describe what the character can see, hear, feel, experience at that point. So I made a classic mistake of this type in Elite Reclamation, where I had this wonderful scene where Kahina's... if you've read Elite Reclamation, you'll know the scene where she's in the Eagle and it's crashing on the planet. And I'd written it from her viewpoint, but halfway through, I'd done the classic rookie error of switching viewpoint. And I switched to an omniscient viewpoint. Now, you can use the omniscient viewpoint, but all I mean by that is the viewpoint where you can see everything. You've sort of stepped back beyond the action. And so I started writing from that view about the ship crashing down and the cargo breaking free in the cargo bay and smashing around and the undercarriage being ripped off. And my editor basically said, "You can't do that." I was like, "Well, that's brilliant, but this stuff's really, really good." I said, "It is, but Kahina can't see it. She's in the cockpit. So she doesn't, she might hear a bang, she might hear some strange screeching noises, and bits and pieces obviously are being ripped off the spaceship as it's crashing, but she doesn't know that's what's happening because she can't see it. All she can hear is what she's experiencing. So you've got to be very careful to make sure that your viewpoint is the right one and that you don't alter it unless you're going to give a very, very distinct shift to the reader to tell them that you are switching viewpoint. Otherwise they go, "Oh, hang on a minute, she's sitting in the seat. How can she see that? That doesn't make any sense." So that's a classic error. Viewpoint is a harm. It's really easy to lose it on the way through. And switch from one character to another one, to another one, to another one, or back into the omniscient and then back into a character. Choose one, stick with it, and then, in the next scene, transition to another viewpoint. So be that one very careful. So let's move on. What else is the next one? So here we go. I've highlighted all lots and lots of blue stuff, lots of green stuff here. Here's the next classic error. You've probably heard show don't tell. This is a bit of tell, which isn't ideal. And yeah, good comment from Daddy Hogger there. I know people who write person simply to stop themselves behaviours. Oh, first person. Yeah, so actually we ought to have a discussion. We'll do that in another episode about first person, third person. I tend to write in third person because I always have a lot of characters, but you may want to write in the first person. But if you do write in the first person, you can only experience things through that person, i.e. you in the story. If you can't see it, if you can't hear it, if you can't feel it, you don't know it's happening. And that can be quite limiting, quite a challenge. Third person, you've got more complexity to manage, so it's very hard. So anyways, here, a little bit further down, so Miru's asking, why are we up here? Kiri silences with a wave, put a finger to her lips, so that's okay. She's kind of, shh, I'm about to think. And then we get this sort of weird aside. She was like that. She spoke more with her hands than her voice. And Miru knew better than to hurry her. She could never be rushed. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but where's that come from? Is that Kiri? Well, no, it's not. It's kind of Miru. We're sort of inside his head suddenly. So we've seen switched as well, and Miru knows better than to hurry her. Well, we are being told something there by me, in this case, the writer, that actually it would be much, much better if we made that determination for ourselves as a reader, because what we're basically saying is, the inexperienced writer here, in myself, is actually saying to you, the reader, you're not smart enough to understand my amazing piece of work. I'm going to tell you what's happening, which is actually mildly insulting. So don't do that to your readers. If there's a complexity that you want to get across, and in this case, it's the idea here that I'm applying a little bit of characterization to Kiri, which is a good thing. That she tends to choose her words carefully. But what I've done here is I've kind of spoilt it by saying she chooses her word carefully. So, Mr. Reader, make sure you pay attention to that, because when she says something, it's going to be important. I've given the game away. I've spoilt it. I've not allowed you, the reader, to make your own interpretation of the way she speaks. So I've told you. What I should have done here is I should have shown you, and I have actually done that. In the previous sentence, she kind of just cuts him off just with a gesture, puts a finger to her lips. That's all I needed. I didn't need the next sentence at all. So an editor would cut that out straight away and go, you don't need that. You're spoiling the story by telling what you want the readers to infer. You've shown them what they need to infer. They're not stupid. The readers will go, oh, so hang on. So Kiri is this sort of slightly bossy, slightly impatient. We've got that already from the sentence above. And then I go on and compound the error. So here I go. This is a really bad example of telling and not showing, because I basically explain everything in the next paragraph, which is a complete waste of your time. So she was one of those people who could be around for a long time. Yet if someone asked you some basic questions about her, you'd find it difficult to answer. Completely telling you all the mystery about this girl that you otherwise would kind of be thinking yourself, what kind of person is she? And then you kind of like, I know now. It's boring. It's not a good way to describe, get you interested in the character. So I've also, divulged you things here that there's no way you should know at this stage, because, I'm supposed to be in Kiri's perspective. She's not thinking this. She's not saying it. This is suddenly the narrator just jumping into the story and telling you stuff about the characters. This is not how you do it. Okay. So, what I'm obviously trying to get across here is that Miri is a bit of a misfit. She doesn't fit in with people. She doesn't have many friends. Not many people know much about her, and she's kind of got this aloofness to her. But what I've actually done is blown the gaff. I've kind of taken all the mystery about what this girl is like and told you what it is. And that really does spoil this story quite badly. A couple of questions. Daddy Hoggy, yes, sometimes tell is valid. Yes, it is, because there's some complicated things sometimes, particularly in a short story. Actually, you might need to just get across. If you don't want to necessarily expose everything through through dialogue or something. I prefer to try, or I actually prefer just to leave it out and leave you, the reader, to go, why the hell did they say that? Because it makes you engage with the story a bit more. Commander Terra Firma, yes, that is a very good suggestion. Could you have Kiri thinking or thought reacted to? Yes, I do that a lot in my stories. You quite often probably see in some of my books that there's italics when I want to give you, the reader, a little snapshot of the thoughts that are going on in somebody said. That's definitely a valid technique. So Kiri could have had a thought at this point. Oh, for God's sake, stop talking. I'm trying to concentrate. Something like that. That would have been quite a good way of doing it. Just a quick question from Rack Zenith there. Piece of writing. Easiest way, either you can Facebook me, or I'll drop an email that you can get me in the stream here. Hang on a moment. So if you send it to inquiries, send it to that email address. That's the easiest way to get it across to me. That'd be fine. So, so thinking, getting inside the head of the character, I use italics for that sort of stuff. To be honest, there aren't any hard and fast rules on how you do that. So as long as you're consistent, it's kind of okay. Italic thoughts are quite nice. I'm not sure if I even came up with that. I probably pinched it from something like Daddy Hoggy by the look of it. That's good. So this bit here, I have really spoilt the story. A good editor would rip that to shreds and go, you must take that out, rewrite it. You've got to find a completely different way of doing this. Your intention here, the intention is good. Kiri is an aloof, misfitty type character, but don't tell the reader that she's a aloof, misfitty type character. That is very, very bad writing. Okay, so don't do that. Next one, highlighted here in yellow. This this one I do a lot. Adverbs or describing words. No, not describing words. Modifying words, I suppose. But adverbs in general sense. The interesting thing here is, and if you ever went to school, which I'm assuming most of you did in English, you were possibly, certainly I was at school, and certainly kids today are, from experience of my own children, told to use as many adverbs as possible, be as expressive as you can. So suddenly, wonderfully, brilliantly, all of those kind of words. No, don't do them in writing. Okay, every single one that you don't need, get rid of it, unless it's really, really, really crucial. And by that I mean you should have maybe a handful in your entire book or your entire story. You have to be honest, the best piece of advice I can give you is go through your entire novel searching for, I'll do it, there we go, searching for ly space, not LLY, there we go, LLY, there we go, 68 quite likely adverbs in a 9-page story. That is atrocious. Okay, nothing marks out a amateur piece of writing, to be honest, than excessive adverbs. Okay, suddenly, quietly, suddenly again. What have I got here? Quietly, newly, originally, family is okay. That's not an adverb. Suddenly, directly, occasionally, gently, occasionally again. Obviously, you've got to kill them, okay? You've got to kill them. It's really, really important to get rid of adverbs, which is entirely different advice to what you will have heard at school, saying, put loads of adverbs in because it's brilliant, because it's expressive writing. No. All they're completely waste of space if you take them. Let's go back to this one. What do you think it is, she asked, suddenly turning around? What is different about the sentence if I say, what do you think it is, she asked, turning around and gazing directly at him? Well, in fact, let's get rid of the directly. I didn't even flag that one. There we go. So I don't need that either. There you go. Look, let's do some editing on the fly. They don't add anything. All they do is put extra words in and slow the story down. So Be utterly, utterly brutal with adverbs. Almost certainly you don't need them. Um, if you want to get the impatience in two things, use the dialogue. So, what do you think it is? She asked, turning round and gazing at him with her large brown eyes. It's fine. The urgency is there. If the urgency isn't there, go back and have a look at the dialogue and see if you can make it more abrupt. Or maybe I could have changed this one to what? She asked. And you're going, well, why is she reacting? She's turning around. She's obviously, use the dialogue to drive the dynamics of the scene. Commander Terraform, really good question. Why do teachers encourage extra adverbs? I have no idea. They're probably because they haven't read Stephen King's All Right, quite possible, yes. Good suggestion, Cyril. I've had a look at some of the stuff that my kids have been taught, and it's utterly, utterly mind-boggling. Daddy Hoggy and I have had a few debates on this one, around subjunctive clauses and what are some of the other phrases? Dump some in the chat for me, Daddy Hoggy, because I have no idea what some of them mean. There are some really, really technical construction, fronted adverbials. That's another one, and I have no idea what they are. All I know is that you don't need to know them to be a writer. So the vast majority of what you study, certainly today, for English GCSE, it's not a great deal of use for writing a story. Grammar, yes, where to use a comma, where to use an apostrophe, plurals, basic spelling, all that kind of good stuff. Yes, that's all good stuff. But some of these technical constructs are just way, way over the top of my head. My kids come over, I just used a fronted adverbial. Good. What's one of them, son? Yeah, but you're an author, No, I don't. There's a lot of really technical stuff, and you just won't use it. So you can move some of those words around, play around with it, but be brutal on adverbs. Please, please, please be brutal on adverbs. So there we go, gently, coming back again. There, that one's probably not too bad, but it shone in the sky. Can you really shine gently? Not really. All those kind of things. Very is another good word. Does it add the thing no? So you can think all those kind of good things. So here's another section. Unlike most other styles, it never stinkle. Just too much description. What's going on? I'm exposing here. So this is exposition. Is the posh word for this? This is basically me going, here's a bit of my world building, guys. Come and be impressed. It doesn't help the story; it just slows it down. What happens here is you can craft this quite well, and you can make it nice English, and you can make it flow, and you can do all kind of good stuff. What will happen is your readers will go, I'm going to skip that paragraph because I can see that there's some dialogue coming up, and your carefully crafted, clever piece of work will just get skipped, and you don't really want to waste your time writing something that nobody's ever going to read. So be very careful with kind of explaining stuff too much. You can drop things in a bit more subtly, and particularly here near the beginning of the story is not a good place to be explaining some of the background. You really want what we need to do is we want to get to know the two characters, find out whether they're going to be interesting or not. We want to get to, okay, well, there's clearly something about to happen, but what is it? We need to get to that point faster. So an editor's going to be looking at this thinking you've got too much description here. You've got a bit of exposition about what's coming up. Your point of view is all wrong. You've got you've got way too many adverbs. Your story is dragging already. You're losing me. Okay? So that's right. Kurt Van Nettiget, yes, that's right. Only write the bits that people are going to read. You don't want to write a whole page of really, really cool description and have everyone go, I'm not reading that bit. Let's get back to the dialogue where the story actually starts, because people want the story. So once you've got into it a bit, and there's a reason why people go for the first chapter of a story that, and say it's got to be brilliant, even if the rest of the book is mediocre. If the first few chapters are great, then you'll probably give it the benefit of the doubt. If your first chapter doesn't hook you, you've lost it. Nobody's going to persevere. So your first chapter has to be brilliant. So I've got some fundamental problems with this story already, and we're only on page 5. And I think, actually, this is only really page 2. because I'm in danger of already boring the reader because I'm that big. And this is crucial for a short story. I've only got 9 pages here, I think, of actual story, and I'm losing the pace, so that's not good. So here, another one: modifiers of adverbs are even worse than adverbs. So Kiri snapped almost angrily. How can you be almost angry? Either you're angry or you're not. So let's, for God's sake, if she's going to be angry, let's make her angry. And I've already told you that, the reader, because she snaps it. So I'm not interested in the words Kiri snapped almost angrily. It does, that just does not add anything at all. That's appalling bit of writing, and almost again. So I do that a lot. I try and pacify some of the phrasing in my stories when I'm drafting them early on. And this is a really common one for me. Almost this, not quite that. You're not almost angry. It's like being almost pregnant. It's just, it's a binary condition. You're angry. Okay, and I don't need to tell you you're angry because she snapped it, and that's another one. That's another modifier. A point that's worth noting here. This is. Again, not really brilliant writing. It's probably okay. I'm going to flag it with a bit of magenta. Okay. Said is fine. Okay. So he said, she said, they said. You don't need to comment, expectorate, chortle, shout, all these other words. Okay. Occasionally it's useful. Use them really, really sparingly. What I've done on the previous line, this is actually Maru speaking here, is I haven't even modified it at all because we know it's him. We have done a scene, we actually have done a POV transition here, and we're now in Maru's perspective. So this one doesn't need a he said or Maru said because we know who it is. But you do need to read the interaction. It's quite easy when there's only 2 characters, as it is in this case, because one says something, then the other one says something. There's nobody else to kind of bring into the situation. If you have 3 or more characters in a scene, you're going to have to use the modifiers, and you're going to have to figure clever ways to do it to stop it getting kind of he said, she said, they said, he said, they said, she interrupted. So use interrupted, use shouted. You're going to have to use little bits and pieces in there to get away with it. And I think in this case, if I get rid of the almost angrily, which is horrible, I can, like Daddy Hoggy says, I can probably get away with snapped because, although I would argue that I'm not interested in the words, kind of tells you that she's a bit short-tempered anyway. And here's a good bit of writing, which has been spoilt by the bit before. So her hands clenching and unclenching. Well, that is a good bit of writing. So I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that because hands clenching and unclenching is like she's frustrated. You can see that. But I haven't told you she's frustrated. I've shown you she's frustrated. So you get the snapped and the almost angrily is overkill. The next bit, so if I'm not interested in the words, Kiri said, her hands clenching and unclenching, you as the reader get that because, okay, well, she's obviously a bit tense because you're seeing it. Okay, and then I go and spoil it. Next paragraph. Here, Miro frowned. He knew Kiri had been reprimanded by one of us. Exposition again. Here's stuff that you shouldn't really be privy to in the story. So I'm introducing something called the Masters, something called recital. Her direct manner caused friction. Well, we've got that, Drew. We understand that from what's being talked about. She obviously had something on her mind. That's really, really bad. Well, duh. Again, and look, I've just discovered another adverb. So I'm riddled with adverbs and all sorts of things here. So now it's probably worth at this point just saying. So I'm being a bit brutal to this. I won't be this harsh on anybody else writing, but do use this. I'll send this document out with the color coding if you're interested afterwards as well, so you can kind of see the problems that I've identified with. This is not also the entire problems with this story either, because I've only I took about 45 minutes to kind of go through this. There will be other problems as well. So, a comment there for Daddy Hoggy again. In genuine dialogue, two speakers, I will only do the he said, she said every fourth line or so, just as a marker for the reader. Yeah, that's a good point, because it just helps the reader to kind of, who's speaking again? Particularly if there's quite a lot of dialogue in a scene, or there's an argument going on. You don't want to lose track of who's saying what. And actually, come editing time, I've occasionally made the error where I've gone to do some editing myself, and I've actually deleted a line of dialogue and then not realised that I've sequenced things out. So by deleting a line, I've upset the way it kind of goes, and then halfway down, the characters are arguing each other's viewpoint. So be careful of that when you're editing. That's quite an interesting one. Sorry, it's a bit of squash. So again, another adverb. Just a typo here. Go on, full stop, capital letter she. Not quite surprised how that one got through, because lots of other people would have looking at it. That should be a comma, and it should be a lowercase she. So that's just a piece of dialogue. Now, the rules as to the use of commas and things and bits of punctuation inside dialogue do vary a little bit depending on who you ask. I tend to always keep my punctuation inside the speech marks. That's what most, certainly British publishers prefer. It's not a universal rule. So the way you should construct it is as an entire sentence. So that should be a comma there, and that should be a lowercase s. So we have a full sentence, go on, comma, she nodded. You should be able, the rule basically is you should be able to read the phrase or the sentence grammatically correctly without the speech marks in it. If it doesn't make sense without the speech marks, there's a problem. So that's kind of a rule of thumb there. So let's just have made that correctment. Again, I've done another one here, slight embarrassment. Either she is embarrassed or she's not. And to be honest, I don't need that again, because I need to find a better way to express that he doesn't really want to do this. So again, that's another tell, not show example. Whether or not you like my tiny little piece of poetry, it's probably not great, but again, here again, that's a typo. That should be a comma. Kiri acknowledged. Acknowledged is actually, I do use that one a fair bit. So it's, acknowledged isn't too bad. If you're basically trying to give the impression that someone's giving you an affirmative statement, that's quite useful. So yes, with slight embarrassment, there's a good point actually there, terra firma, sorry. With slight embarrassment, he mumbled the dog, so he's mumbling it, so he's kind of doing it under his breath. So you, the reader, get the impression he doesn't want to do it. I don't need the other bit, so I could tighten that up, cut it down. Less is more, as they say. There's another cliche for you. So again, Miru who's complained, Miru who's replied, Kiri has scoffed. Too many modifiers of the dialogue. Just, you don't need them. And then here's my piece that I've actually pinched from Ezekiel there, which I've done this in italics. I'm not sure if that's actually appropriate, because I normally use thought bubble, kind of italics for thought bubbles, but that's just how I did it in this one. I don't think I've got any thought bubbles in this particular one. So Kiri's going from frustration to scoffing to scowling, so she's got quite a lot of facial expressions going on here. It's a bit too much, really. Oh, and hello, way out. Oh, I missed that. I heard the dingle, I missed it, but whoever that was, hello, thank you for coming along. So this is, well, it's maybe italics is right here, maybe it's not, but it kind of distinguishes it from the rest of the text, so it's okay. Again, here I'm telling, not showing, her tone indicating disapproval and disappointment. I think you've probably got that as the reader, that Miri does not like what Miru is saying here. Sorry, Kiri is not liking what Miru. But again, I go and compound it again and again and again by saying the same thing. So she scowls at him, snaps two words at him. Her tone is disapproval and disappointment. She kind of insults him in a kind of passive-aggressive sort of way, and then it wasn't a compliment. So I've really kind of ladled it on there. That's way too much. Okay, I need to back that right off to make that a little bit more subtle. Here's another one. These are we've probably got the impression here that these are relatively young people. I've kind of got late teenage sort of age in mind as I'm writing this. And then suddenly Maru comes out with this phrase here, elucidate your thoughts. No. That's totally and utterly out of character for him at this point. You know, where's he suddenly got that word from? I'm just, you know, my younger self, well, I suppose 2010, how old was I? 40, so not that much younger, but I'm showing off the fact that I know a word here. No, don't do that. It looks out of place. Then it looks a bit odd. And biting back a rebuttal, there's better ways to do that as well. He wants to kind of give her a bit of a verbal slanging, but he doesn't. So I need to get that across in a dialogue, really, rather than kind of do it this way. Elucidate your thoughts sounds very chilled, doesn't it? Oh, well, elucidate your thoughts. Whereas actually, what I wanted to, he's actually annoyed here that she's kind of going, well, that's, you'll be brilliant if you do it like that. And he just comes back with elucidate your thoughts. How many teenage boys in a confrontational situation have you ever heard say elucidate your thoughts? That's just rubbish. That's a appalling piece of dialogue. That's kind of George Lucas Star Wars quality dialogue there. That's really, really bad. So anyway, let's move on. Now here's a good bit of writing. Okay, so Kiri walks to the summit of the hill. Probably don't need the very, because either it's the summit or it's not. Always do that logical qualifier to yourself. Do I need a modifier here? Because what's it adding? Either I'm at the summit of the hill or I'm not. I can't be not quite at the summit. It's just weak. But here the Herg shuffles away, confused by movements, and then went back onto munching on the soft red souffle bushes around them. That is a good way to add a little bit of description to the scene without overcooking it. Okay. So you've got there's a little bit of sci-fi nonsense here, some made-up tree or bush or something, and I've called it a souffle bush. Well, okay. So but what you get the impression of is there's now a hillside with some stuff on it, and I don't need to do any more than that. I don't need to tell you the size of the leaves or how tall the bush is. You've got an idea of what a souffle bush looks like based on that description. I don't need to know what you think it looks like. I know roughly what I think it looks like, but you will have a completely different view of it to me. That's fine. That's fine. And then I've gone on again, streaming away from her in a sudden gust of wind. Cliche. There's a dramatic moment coming up, and the wind is going to whistle through her hair and blow it backwards dramatically. No. That's not good either. That doesn't happen in real life. The wind does not just arrive at a particular dramatic point and blow your hair dramatically backwards. That's just naff. Okay, so naffness, you have to delete the naffness as well. That's not good stuff. Anyway, so similar sort of things. Clearly, friendly, curious imagination. Remember, though, I'm expositioning, I'm describing stuff that you wouldn't necessarily need. So this just needs lots and lots of cutting. And bitterly, longingly, frequently, it's rife with it. So, what's interesting here, this is what an editor will do to your work if you haven't caught this stuff in advance. Okay, now this particular story did not go through a professional editor. I published this myself when I thought it was awesomely, fantastically, brilliantly, 100% ready to go. And this is the quality level that I was at 8 years ago. And it is not broadcast quality, whatever you want to describe it. An editor will rip this to shreds, and rightly so, because it isn't good enough. So this is kind of hopefully useful as a guide as the sort of things that you need to kind of go back and look at. Now I'm going to skip forward a bit because I'm not going through this nearly as fast as I thought I would. And most of this stuff is similar sort of things. You can see slowly, slightly, distinctly. The other one to look out for is here. Repeating words very, very close together. It's not actually grammatically wrong. It's actually not a problem in sentence construction, but it does jar the reader because they think, oh, hang on, I've just read that word. That feels odd. So if you see one word in close proximity to the same word, find another word. Okay, so what I should do here is I should maybe change this tail to faint glow behind it, or possibly the glow here. Swap them out, do something like that, because you don't want close repetitions of words. Again, complete mix of scene transition here, so point of view problem. And then again, I'm telling you again here what you should be thinking in the story. So something has appeared in the sky basically here, a star. It's become a glowing sphere. Clearly it's getting bigger. It's coming down towards them. Kiri fancies she could see the flames trailing behind it. That's okay. And then, was this some kind of chariot? Who the hell's thinking that? Is it you, the reader? Is it Kiri? Is it somebody else? Where's that coming from? It's kind of, where did that happen? Here's another one: the passive. The passive. If you're writing an action scene, which this is now becoming an action scene because there's something heading towards them, and it's presumably not good. Hence the reason why there's a story. It's coming this way, Maru gasped. That's okay. Turning about and preparing to flee. Preparing to flee? Right, I'm just going to get ready to flee. What does that mean? You don't prepare to flee. Oh look, there's something coming towards me. I better turn around. I'm going to dig my feet in, and I'm going to be ready to go. No, you don't prepare to flee. They don't prepare to do anything. In fact, try and avoid this passive sentence construction. Getting ready to, preparing to, all that sort of stuff. Just do it. Okay, just run. Panic, flee, leg it, etc., etc. What would be better here? It's coming this way, Maru gasped. He should grab her, pulling her around. Kiri, we must leave. Kiri, and she won't move because she's staring up at whatever this thing is. It's that sort of thing. Speed that up. Kiri was frozen to the spot in awe. I'm telling you again what she's thinking. You can figure that out for yourself. So the awe should go. The sphere is now a blazing ball of fire with deadly speed. It's just a glowing ball of fire. It's coming at you. When you get into a situation here where you are, trying to write an action scene, so that you're picking up the pace. Your sentences have got to get shorter. Okay, you've got to make things more dynamic, more kind of boom, 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 boom. To get the thing going. There's quite a nice piece of description here, but to be honest, it's too long. So in a brief instant, 5 lines of explanation happened. That's not good. Okay, so in a brief instant, a terrifying noise rose about them. You don't need a brief instant. Terrifying noise. So what I should write is something much punchier, like terrifying noise, echoing torment of ripping and shrieking, reverberations around the hills. Just take out all the extraneous stuff and just get to the actual core of what's actually happening. The Hurgs panicked and fled, shrieking. That's quite nice. Kiru and Maru instinctively threw themselves. You don't need to write that. They duck. They throw themselves at the ground. Now here's another point of view. Whose point of view are we in at the moment? Well, we were in Maru's. He was looking at Kiri, trying to get her to move. She's looking up into the sky, and then suddenly the conflagration passes above them. Who's looking at that? It's not Miru or Kiri, because they should be face planted at this point. So who's looking at that? I've jumped into omniscient view. Okay, can't do that. You can't just keep moving this description viewpoint around. And good point there, Chris. Yes, brief instant. Well, yeah. Isn't an instant sort of brief anyway? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Seconds passed and the noise faded abruptly away. Well, that's exactly the opposite of what's happened. So seconds have passed and the noise has faded away. So it's obviously not abrupt. It's taken a few seconds to fade away. So again, abruptly, slowly. Again, you've got to strip out all these modifiers in. So basically, something's crashed on the ground, and so on and so forth. Here's a bit of show. Here's a bit of tell, not show. Miru is tired. That's just lazy. How do I get across the fact that he's tired? What the point here is that Kiri is fitter than Maru. I need to find other ways to get that impression across. He's maybe he's gasping for breath or something. He can't keep up with her. She can run too fast. And then here I actually compound that kind of point of view problem by saying, from his perspective, we're in his point of view, so we don't need to say that we're in his point of view. So again, another kind of rookie kind of error there. He could also see we're in his point of view, so we don't need to explain that we can also see because that's what he's looking at. And more adverbs. Up close, the metallic nature of the object was obvious. Don't need to say obvious, just describe it, just get to it. And here we go, the crowd around it. So basically this thing has crashed and people are looking at it. The crowd seemed wary. What, the entire crowd? Every single person in that crowd was wary, absolutely guaranteed. So no, some people might be kind of completely chilled out about it. Some people might be terrified. Some people might be, all sorts. You can't just kind of generalize like that. That's not good. Evidently, look at all the leads. And this is a quite good one. The crowd held its breath. Entire crowd simultaneously holding their breath. No, that can't happen either. People are going to be keeling over all over the place. That's no good either. So slowly there, but appeared. Here's another bit of that passive stuff I was talking about again. The hood itself was similar to the rest of the object, but appeared to have glass sides. Either it had glass sides or it didn't. And even if these guys don't necessarily understand the technology, but appeared doesn't add anything to this sentence. That's not good. Here's another one. That's amazing. That one got through. Look, double repetition of a word. I can't believe that somebody on the elite form didn't spot that one, but obviously they didn't because it's still in here. So that's a problem. Isn't anyone going to investigate? She demanded, showing the palms of her hands. Well, what I mean by that is kind of like, like this. Come on, guys, aren't we going to go and have a look? That's what I was trying to get across. But that's not a very, showing the palms of her hands can be. What's she trying to do? That's a bad bit of description. I think it's not useful. She was met by blank stares and tutted. Well, maybe not too bad on that one. Gingerly, there's another one of those adverbs. Again, here's tell not show. Kiri was confused by what she saw. Don't tell the reader what they are supposed to think. Okay, that's bad. Again, another scene change problem here. And then think you're getting the idea. This story is okay, but it needs quite a lot of work. Dimly, easily, curiously, all kind of virtually. Disconsolately. Yeah, I'm showing off some longer words there. That's a problem. And so again, this bit here now, this is where the story kind of gets its kind of slight twist, because what's happening here is that this spaceship has crashed on a planet where there is very little, the technology doesn't exist. So that's the premise of the story, and they don't really know what this thing is. We've got these masters who are kind of the religious leaders of this group of people who are basically in charge and telling people what the truth is. And Kiri doesn't get on well with them because she is dared to have an independent thought. But again, here I go explaining all that. In a kind of past tense here. Kiri claimed it was because this, that, and the other. Unfortunately, she'd said this out loud and landed herself. It's not bad as a story concept, but we need to find a different way to get this kind of across. And all the best there, Daddy Hoggy. You've got to bail out. Thames Water has a leak. We've got no water. Oh, God. Well, I hope you sort that out, fella. All the best. Thank you very much for your help tonight. Hope we get that sorted out. Again, lots of tell, not show. This is really important if you're writing a story. Don't insult the intelligence of your readers. You're not doing it deliberately. I certainly wasn't doing it deliberately here. But what is happening here is I'm telling you how to think. I'm telling you how to interpret my story, which is an absolute no-no. Every time you read a story, you will create your own imagery of it, and it will be totally and utterly different to what the author had in mind. And that's okay. And that should be fine for any author. That's why film conversions of books quite often get a lot of people really happy and a lot of people really upset because it just doesn't match up with what they thought it should look like. So it's difficult. When you read a book, you create your own version of it, and that version is utterly valid. You don't need me, the author, telling you what it exactly should be. So the as we say, the denouement is coming up on this thing now, and basically what happens is. Again, I've gone to this kind of passive. Again, he could only assume. No, let's get right into the character. So basically, Kiri thinks this crashed thing is important, and we kind of, as readers who are au fait with what's going on here, know it's a spaceship that has just crashed for whatever reason. But Kiri gets into it, and she starts jabbing buttons that she finds inside. And apart from the adverbs here, she triggers the ident computer inside the spaceship without really understanding what it is, and then effectively activates the escape pod. So if you imagine your kind of elite spaceship, then what's happening here is that somebody who really doesn't know what's going on has clambered into the cockpit, pressed the escape button, and she started the ejection sequence. So that's basically what's happening here. And the question from Terraform is, if there's a need to tell some kind of background history, how is a good way to do that? So it very much depends. I'm just going to switch a light on here because I just noticed the light level has dropped dramatically while I've been talking. In a short story, you really don't have the opportunity for a vast amount of backstory. So you've got to pick and choose the amount of backstory you want. You really want your story to start as late as possible in the overall thing. So you don't want to be in a situation where your short story is overloading the reader with everything that had to happen before, because you don't have time to do that. Short story competitions can be as low as 1,000, 2,000 words. This is twice as long as that, and I'm struggling to get any kind of background in. You need to set it up with a minimum amount of words. Now, if you're writing a novel, so something like Elite Reclamation, let's say, was about 120,000 words, you've got a bit more time to do that sort of stuff. But what you mustn't do is you mustn't do it early on, okay? Because the reader will just go and won't find your book interesting. The first chapter, the prologue, whatever it happens to be that gets the reader, has to be exciting. Good rules of thumb is introduce your character, put them in a really, really difficult situation early on. You'll find that in Elite Reclamation, if you recall, I blew the bejesus out of an entire city in the prologue, and 3 people got spaced, in the first couple of pages of the book. Oh, blimey, stuff happens. Yeah, I mean, okay, what's going on? I didn't need to explain. At that point, you knew nothing about the Imperials, nothing about the spaceships, nothing about the prism system, nothing about Elite, really, other than that there clearly were weapons that could blow cities up. That's all you'd learnt by that point. And it gets you into the story. Later on, you can then go, okay, well, the Imperials are like this, and the Federation's like that, and yada, yada, yada. But you can't do it really, really, really early on because you don't have time. So you can let a character give a little bit of a history lesson, but you've got to make sure it kind of makes sense. Because if you listen to most people talking to each other, what you'll discover is that they don't do long speeches. If you listen to any conversation on a train or in a kind of public area in a coffee shop, just listen to it every so often. Don't listen to necessarily the words they're saying, just listen to the way they interact. What you'll find is that they interrupt each other constantly. Bum, 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 bum. They don't go, yeah, and oh, really? Oh, yes, well, that's exciting. That's not how people talk. In real life, people go, oh, yeah, and did you get to the, and yeah, I know, that was interesting. Oh, yeah, I was there. That's how they actually interact in real life. So people don't usually sit down and give history lessons. They're not lectures in normal conversation. So you've got to be a bit sparing how you do that with dialogue. Flashbacks, you can do that. I don't like them myself because I like to read things chronologically, and I always write things generally chronologically as well. Flashbacks can work, however, depending on the type of novel that you're doing. So you have to use those kind of things quite a lot. And Chris, use of in medias res. Now you've lost me there, fella. What does that mean? You're using something that I don't know what it means. You've caught me out. So yeah, question answer, not dialogue. Yeah, as long as you make it natural. Terra firma, it's got to come across as it's not a conversation that's just there for explaining the story. So you can read quite a lot of books where the guys and the girls in the story are having a dialogue which is clearly there just to explain the plot, and people see through that straight away and go, it's not a natural way to converse. So You can try it, but be wary. Be wary. Chris, media res was the term we were taught in school for when a story starts in the middle of events. Yeah, I suppose that's. I mean, that's absolutely fine. I think any story that you tell always has events that happen before and events that happen after. So any story kind of fits that. You just got to choose the bit that you actually want to tell. So that's interesting. So just cracking on towards the end of this now. Here's the next one. Here's a schoolboy error. Exclamation marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Don't do that. Exclamation marks, you should have maybe 10 for an entire novel. Okay? Use them utterly sparingly. They're like chili peppers. You just the tiniest little bit, okay? Just to give it. Don't overdo them. Oh, you absolutely blow it. I mean, this is horrible. This bit here. He is shouting. Get that, but don't use exclamation marks because it's just shouting all the time. Time you use exclamation marks, it's horrible. As a reader, it really goes, whoa, whoa, okay. It's exhausting. Don't overdo the exclamation marks at all. Just a handful for the entire. In a short story of this length, 2 is probably enough to really drive the emphasis. Use your dialogue to explain everything else that's going along. Again, there's another adverb. Again, word repetition. Try and avoid that. And we get to the end here, and basically the escape pod goes off with Kiri in it, and Miru is left behind, wondering what on earth just happened, because of course doesn't understand space flight. The girl's disappeared in a great big puff of smoke, and she's gone. And then I've kind of wrapped this round by going back to that original Ezekiel quote, and to be honest, I've wrapped the story up here quite well. Is I haven't told you what's happened. We don't know if Kiri has survived that experience. The escape pod might have been busted. It might have had a canopy breach, in which case she's just died a horrible death. But all Miru knows is that she's sort of fulfilled this vague prophecy, and he's just wondering whether or not actually it really was her or not. And what I've done here is I've left that question for you, the reader, to decide. So was Kiri really the high priestess of the prophecy? Was it just the fact that a spaceship crashed and she pressed the wrong button when she got inside and now she died? Or has she gone off to a space station? Will she get rescued by the technology behind this, where the spaceship came from? And they're going to have to decide what to do with her at that point, because here's a primitive person from a backward culture suddenly thrust into a high-tech society. I haven't explained any of that. I've left you, the reader, to decide what happens next, and that is the end of the story. And all that happens at the end is Miru basically goes, well, from his perspective, he's going to decide to do that. He's just going to pray, because maybe she is the Holy One, and maybe she's looking down upon him from on high, because he doesn't know the technology that's involved here. So that's the end of that story. And then there's the About the Author page, and It's worth, apart from the cheesy photo, which is way old now, always put a little bit about you. Readers do like to, okay, what's the kind of guy who wrote this story? Is he any good? Maybe he's written something. If I enjoyed the story, I'm going to want to find out more about the person who wrote it, and have they written anything else? And you'll notice here, this story is 2010, and my social media links are exactly the same as they are today. If you're going to set up a social media presence, and this is a topic for another stream, keep it consistent as much as you can, because then anybody who finds this story a decade after you wrote it, which is floating around on the internet somewhere, may still signpost its way back to you. So if it was any good, if they found something in it that they liked, then you can it's still signposting back to you, and hopefully, obviously, a decade on or so, that you've got much better at what you're doing, and you've got something. Now, every story that you put out there is effectively a sales tool for what you do. So if you are serious about writing, then have your work signpost people back to you or your other work. So there's a whole piece about it there, and I've got a silly thing in here which doesn't really tell you anything about me at all. But it's, well, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I quite like it. It's just one of those kind of slightly Douglas Adams-y type things. And that's a really good suggestion from Terra Firma. Get your own domain name. Nothing screams amateur like Gmail or Hotmail or stuff like that. If at all, it's not that expensive. £20 a year will get you a domain name and a basic website and an email that's part of that domain. Choose well. I'm fortunate actually in this regard because Drew Wagar is quite an unusual name even on the internet at large. I think there's one other Drew Wagar in the world and he got murdered. So I'm quite fortunate that Drew Wagar is quite a good pen name. Oh yeah, CompuServe or AOL. Yeah, don't do that. God's sake, yeah. And you might want to consider a writer's name. There's nothing wrong with a pen name, as long as it points back to you. But use something that's hopefully memorable and consistent. That's quite an important thing. So I kind of got to the end of that, slightly overrun again. I'm going to have to probably go for an hour and 15, maybe an hour and a half on these streams because I can't get through it fast enough. And I'm still learning. Hey, it's all good. Looking at this story now, this, by my standards now, back in 2010, this was a published story. I thought was good. I thought it was excellent quality. I thought it told a good story. And I was happy for it to go out in its current form. So looking at it now, to the standards that I'm writing to myself now, 8 years later, this is an early first draft, nowhere near publishable quality at this stage. Lots and lots of technical errors, but it does have the premise of a reasonable story. I quite like the way it goes from a vague prophecy through to these two characters. There's a spaceship crashing, there's a nice bit of excitement, and then at the end it kind of goes, ooh, so what do you think happened there, guys? That's okay. The premise is good, but the technical errors are really, really letting it down. It needs work, basically. It needs a good redraft, then it will probably need another scan for errors. It's probably got a couple of redrafts before it's good enough to be turned into a short story. So that's the sort of quality difference that I'm looking at it from. And you guys on the stream have been helping me find other flaws with it as well. And we could probably go through it lots more times and find a whole bunch of stuff that's still wrong with it, even if we went through it. So that gives you, I hope, a view of some of the craft that you need to apply to your storytelling. I can see how much I've improved over those 8 years because all this stuff leaps at me like a sore thumb now. But back then, it didn't show up. And this also went out to a relatively critical audience on the elite forums. People who were smart, could spell, liked stories, liked reading the book. Were not shy coming back with feedback. This had gone through their lenses, so quite a few people had inspected the story before it was published in this state, which just shows you when you're going from fan fiction to kind of proper published work, there is a quality delta that you've got to go through. Now, just before I kind of finish up today, let's just show you what that looks like in the sense of a modern novel. I will say that actually. If I go back to the work I've been doing on Lords of Midnight recently, books, Midnight Chronicles, there we go. So what you'll notice is here is first draft is a document. Then there is the second draft. Then there is a third. There's a fourth. Then there's a final draft. Then there's a pre-typeset final draft. And then there's actually a final draft. Probably final draft. And what you'll notice here is that authors will start swearing by this point. And the general rule of thumb that I kind of advise people is if the amount of time you've got to generate a novel from 0 to published book is, let's say, 100%, that's a nice easy way to do it, about 50% of it is the first draft. Okay? Everything else is polish. Everything else is polish. So if you're going to write a book, when you get to the end, i.e. you've written the story, you're about halfway through the job. Now that's kind of like, really? To a lot of people. But it is. The end of the first draft is the end of the fun bit. And then the hard work begins. And I must admit, I'm not a big fan of editing. It does drive me absolutely potty. So the first draft there of Lords of Midnight, you notice I finished it on the 15th of the 12th last year. How many characters was it? So it was 144,000 words. The final draft here, as you can see, was on the 14th of the 4th, 2008. So that's almost 4 months later. And a radically different document in terms of the word count and the structure by this point, 151,000. So I'd added actually another 7,000 words into that in order to get that to work. Quite often editing will cut down actually on the number of words rather than increase it. That's the normal sense because you're actually stripping things out that you don't need. But it gives you an idea of the kind of churn that you're going to have. So the amount of time it actually takes you to physically write the book is about half of the job. And then you've got the rest of the thing, polishing it up, looking for those adverbs, looking for those word repetitions. And that's before you get onto any of the law problems that you may or may not have encountered. One of the problems of going through and editing a document is the continuity issue. So if you fix something in chapter 8, you might accidentally, unwittingly, have busted something in chapter 2 that you've said, Luke saw the moon prince, grabbed his sword, he was unusually left-handed. And in chapter 8, you go, I'm just writing this, and I'm going to, okay, he pulls his sword out with his right hand and kills the goblin, whatever it happens to be. You've just busted your story, because all your readers are going to go, hang on a minute, he was left-handed a moment ago. What's going on here? So little bits of that's not quite law, but the kind of the background consistency for the characters and anything like that, you've got to go and do those consistency checks as you're editing, because you'll forget. You know, it's 150, in this case, 155,000 words of story. You can't possibly remember all that detail. So you're going to have to go through and do continuity checks. That's why there are so many drafts, because the early ones have lots and lots of technical construction, dialogue, you name it, problems. So, you know, you just got to keep kind of fixing it. Yeah, you're quite right, Chris Viking. Writing is like engineering. You've got to keep doing all that stuff, keep fixing it, keep polishing it. And you never, ever finish. You've just got to cool time on it. How do you change that consistency? The only way I do it is I just have to start again and reread it. There probably are some fancy tools actually. Maybe we can have a look at that in a future stream. I must admit I'm not aware of any. I do it the old-fashioned way, which is to read it and go, oh no, I've said that somewhere else wrong. I'm going to have to go and find it and change it, which is a bit tedious. It's not easy. You have to go through and check that kind of stuff. So that's how I've done it. I don't know if there's some sort of smart, clever ways to do that. There might be, but that's the way I've always done it, which is hard work. Now, again, the rule of thumb is for me on editing, which I've heard a few other people say, is that if you're heartily sick of the story during the editing, if you've got to the point on editing where you really can't stand to pick the thing up anymore and read it again, you're probably about as good as you're going to get. So when you're heartily sick of your book and you're ready to publish it, which may not be the most comfortable feeling, but it's the one that I kind of use as a gut instinct. That's hard. Yeah, and yeah, it is hard to reread your own story afresh because you know what happens and you know all the good bits and the bad bits and the bits you like, all that kind of stuff. So it is worth setting it aside for a bit so it kind of goes stale. That's another reason why it takes a bit longer, because sometimes you just, I can't read this again. I've just finished reading it. So you've got to stop and give it a break. Maybe go do something else. One of the reasons I quite like having multiple books on the go at a given point is I can swap between one and the other and kind of refresh myself, because I still enjoy reading and writing, just not always the same thing. So you have to kind of use those things as well. It is tough, and those kind of things. So there we go. I am going to close us off at that point. I'm going to switch back to my funky main camera. There we go. There we go. So there we go. Sorry, I've just obliterated the chat. I can see it on the screen. So Terraformer, yes, you do that with video editing. Edit. Yep. And when you're sick of it, and you're about to, it's a point of diminishing returns. So you've got to draw a line somewhere. But you could always improve it. There's no doubt about it. You could always improve it. but it's how when you decide it's good enough for you, and that's going to vary by person. That is going to vary by person. So yeah, so keeping a dictionary at hand, sometimes that's good. Yeah, I must admit I do have a thesaurus, which is not a big angry dinosaur. Just to kind of get some different words. Less so now as I'm getting older, because I tend to remember the words quite well, but every so often I'm looking for a particular thing to kind of grasp it. Don't be scared of using a dictionary or thesaurus to look up alternative words, because we're all learning new stuff. Just don't go mad with it, because people go, oh look, he's followed the dictionary, and that sort of sometimes shows up a bit in the text. Some people are quite sensitive to long words, so if you can use a shorter one and get away with it to get the meaning that you want, then that's probably a good thing too. But lots of things like that. So that one hopefully gives you a little bit of a taster of the sort of stuff that is worth looking out for in your story. It is definitely worth going through and looking for all of those pointers that I've given you. So all the adverbs, pacing, the dialogue. Oh, and a good tip on dialogue, read it out loud. If it comes across all horrible and stingy and kind of like, people don't say that, do they? Then you've got it wrong. Okay, if you can read it out loud and it sounds natural, then you're okay. And again, worth the next time you're in a cafe or any public space and people are chatting away, just to not eavesdrop on their conversation, because that would be a little bit spooky and probably a bit dodge, but just listen to the ebb and flow of the way they talk, and it will help inform writing realistic dialogue as well. Yes, I guess some people are sensitive to sesquipedalianism. Right. Exactly that. Yeah. So yeah, just listen to people. Give you a really good flavour. People watching can be quite good fun. So, guys and girls, I've got no idea of genders and don't really care. Thank you very much for coming along. I've overrun again, but hey, never mind. Hopefully you're getting some value out of it. That would be really good. I will upload this to YouTube. Again, back next week. I can't remember what topic I'd pick for next week. I will let you know on Twitter, all the usual places. So if you want to follow me there, then obviously please do, and you'll be able to watch this again on YouTube for reference. That's really good. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you for the comments coming through. That's really, really good. Really, really great to see you. Thank you for the all the interaction as well and the questions. So just keep that coming. I'm getting quite a buzz out of doing this sort of stuff. It's kind of fun to talk to you guys about it all as well. And we'll go through more and more stuff as we go forward. So hopefully you found my story interesting. So if you want to read it, you can still get it from the link. I probably will publish up the our Twitter or something, the modified version, so you can kind of see the the errors that I've highlighted. There will be more in there. So use it as a reference. So kind of, okay, well, here's a piece of writing that isn't too bad, has some promise, but needs some work. And then hopefully you can go and apply those lessons to your own stuff as well. So that'd be good fun. So, time for a drink. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I will see you all next time. And I still haven't come up with a natty writery sign-offy thing yet, so I'm just going to have to say goodbye for the time being. So any advice on those kind of things, I think would be really, really good. So give me a cool sign-off at some point. I'll have to figure one out. So I shall say goodbye for now. Take care, folks. See you next week.